Gary, seeing as I can't be there to have smoko with you and have this discussion with you, I thought I'd put it on a video. I've been trying to get down for the last week, but fuck, it's just been hopeless, just been so busy up here. You're probably the same sort of shit. So I thought I'd give you a video to look at and you can think about it over smoko and come back to me with what your thoughts are. It's to do with stern legs, my favourite bloody subject. And I'm really interested in your opinion on some of what I've got to say. So I've laid out here all the bits out of the top box and out of the lower unit. I'm just going to very quickly walk you through how they work again, just to remind you. It's been a while since you've seen one of these. They're just old bits, they're all buggered, they've been ruined in different strikes along the way, but it's just so I can show you the concept of what I'm thinking about. So the top boxes here work with a two-way clutch, forward and reverse clutch. You have a couple of gears, one on each end. This has only got all the clutch packs in reverse on here at the moment. I haven't put the clutch packs in for forward, it's an old clutch. So I can just sit that gear in like that. Normally they're a little bit harder to put in because you know line all the clutches up when you do it. So for argument's sake, if I was to put it into the reverse instead, put it over and get my way through the plates. Also do it by holding the plates with a pick, because this is not a unit I'm overly concerned about, it's just an old one, it's all damaged goods. Almost all the way on, more to go, there we go, that's it all the way, and you can tell all the clutch plates are free to move, so it's all the way in place. And I'll put this one on even though there's no clutch packs in that side. So that would sit like that, so that's your clutch arrangement. Your pressure from your hydraulic box comes on this end, as you know all about, have a look. Fires out and either fires out the forward clutch or the reverse clutch, depending on which way the selector sends the hydraulic fluid. That engages your gear. So the gear, if the clutches aren't fired out, the gear can free turn from the clutch itself, from the shaft. But as soon as the clutches are engaged, the gear turns with the shaft. So it moves up those splines, and once it's on the splines, hook up on the clutch, push forward, hooks it up, and then you get forward working. It turns, forward gear turns as well as the shaft. This one, the reverse won't turn. This crown wheel is underneath, sits down at the bottom inside here. That gear runs on it like so, and turns the crown wheel, which is your output from the top box. The very simplistic version of it. That's your hydraulic clutch, which this would go on that end. Hold it like that, and then it would go in there like that, with the cover on the front, and that would be your input side there, input there, through the cover, and driving that crown wheel sitting down the bottom there. I'll leave that all out for you to look at as I talk about the lower unit. Remember, there's no bearings on where I normally have them or anything like that. This is just, although there's two bearings there, but the rest of them should be bearings on here, should be bearings on the end of that, bearings on the end of this. Right, lower unit, quite simple. One of the lower units there. We've played with those before as well, pretty simple. The only thing I haven't brought in is the input shaft. I'll just grab one, bear with me a sec. So, lower unit, input shaft, sits down on the bearing cup and so, like there, like so. A little bit further down, I've just set that there at the moment. Yep, just set that on the bearing, it can go through if you just twist it a bit into the spline. Go through into the bearing's dry at the moment, but that sits there like that. Down below that, you have on the bottom end of here, this drops down into here, lines up, sits on the pinion. The pinion sits on there like so, and that will be sitting in here, just above the 2 gears in the lower unit. In the lower unit, you'll have the forward gear sitting hard in the front there. Inside there's a cup that you drive in, sits in the cup like so, and then the output shaft for the outer prop. You can see it's splined inside, goes in next. In place like that, so the bearing, this is shaft is sitting inside a cup in here, just like that, and this is sitting in there just above like so, and that drives the outer prop. Also, we drop our old ones, we have the inner prop shaft for that. That comes over here, sits on there like so, and then this would be sitting in here like so. So the 2 gears, outer prop, inner prop, and the pinion down here in between them, driving the 2 of them counter rotating due to the way the teeth are cut. The shaft obviously only turns the one way, but the teeth are cut so the 2 turn different ways off the same pinion. And that, locating it in place, is that's the retainer, which has a big nut in front of it, and that sits in there like so. If you can see that, I'll leave that there. Now the nightmare for me is these pinions. They just smash with monotonous regularity. Obviously the stainless steel props, between the prop and that gear set is just shafts. There's no sacrificial components. So whenever the boys hit something, that energy gets transferred up and either shatters the pinion, the outer prop gear or the inner prop gear, or sometimes if the load isn't so high on that at the time, sometimes it'll smash one of the teeth off the number 2 gear or the crown wheel out of the top box. And then other times it will smash either the forward or the reverse gear on either side of the clutch. All up, give you some idea. That's your inner prop carrier and drive gear. That's $8,000 currently, brand new, if I can find one. Forward gear, which goes in here, again, if I can find one, $2,500 to $3,000, depending on where you find it, just for the gear itself. The crown wheel, or the pinion I should say, off the top of my head I can't remember, but again around the $1,800 mark. So you've got $1,800, 2.5 if you're lucky, so sort of say 2, 4.5 between those, another 8 there, so $12,000 just for that set of gears, and often all 3 will be smashed together. Forward or reverse are identical, they just get changed direction, they're the same gear. They are, top of my head again when I can find them, around about $2,000 each, so $4,000 for the 2 of them. These I can get a lot better now. They're probably the most common item to fail. Seems to fail before anything else. It'll either be that or the pinion. They'll be the 2 weak points. I got these down now to about $900 each. They were about $1,800, but for some reason the guy I deal with at Yamaha in Japan gets me these for about $900, or it might even be $800, either way. There's another $5 grand worth of gears at the top box, 12 on the bottom, 17k just in gears. You still haven't got bearings, you still haven't got your time. There's 40 hours for me to rebuild one of these now, to re-shim it, clean it, do everything properly and rebuild it. It's quite time consuming. And I'm struggling like hell to get the bits. That's the biggest issue, I just can't get them. I'm really struggling now. So I'm looking at different ideas. I am looking at that jet unit that I was telling you about. I'm just going to turn the camera around to a picture I've just done on the door. So I just want to talk to you about that next. So Just bear with me a second while I try and do this without the camera falling and hitting and breaking and whatever else. Just move back a bit so that you've got all of it. So I've just drawn it very quickly. That's what we've just described over there. Top box there, hydraulic box on the back, clutch in the middle, gears either side of the clutch, gear at the output gear, the number 2 gear, crown wheel, whatever you wish to call it, bearings on the ends, just obviously a very basic version of it. Coming down to the lower unit, input shaft, bearings at the top of the input shaft, another bearing here, needle roller, come onto your pinion at the bottom, your outer prop gear and bearing, and the shaft going all the way out, and then your inner prop gear and bearing and shaft going all the way out, and that's a drawing of it. Now what I'm proposing to do is to effectively, I'll show you on here. First of all, I'll remove all of the clutch out. This is my first part of the proposal, so there's no clutch. I just use the shaft and the bearings which you use at each end and the housings. Trim the hydraulic box up. I'm not going to use it as a clutch. This is number 1 proposal, is I'll use it and have a pulley on this shaft, like a supercharger pulley, with some form of, and it's something between a cam belt and a supercharger belt, running now inside. So that's the top box side on. I'll get the other top box. So there it is, running side on, shaft through like that, pulley running in the middle here, and the pulley with a big belt on it coming out of the bottom here. We'd have to machine this housing out, but that can be done easy enough. It's only soft aluminium. And then run this belt down into the lower unit. In the lower unit, I propose to get away with the input shaft obviously entirely as well. This is the belt coming through. Again, a little bit of machining required for this, and have to block some of the exhaust up. Pulley on the bottom. Here's where it starts to get really, really difficult though. This is the bit where I really am interested in your opinion. I'm just going to move the camera back to the bench again. If you need any of that, just take a still. Or I could even use the proper drawings from the books, the manuals, and use those to discuss it. So on the bottom end, looking for forward gear. As it currently sits, to keep it easy to see and understand, that is in the bottom end of this. Pretty much sit. I'm going to move this back. So it's in the bottom end of this, and the way it's located, pretty much the centre of the shaft between the outer prop drive and the inner prop drive is pretty much dead centre at the bottom of the shaft there. So it sits in there at the bottom about like that. And obviously the pinion turns, and it turns one shaft that way and the other shaft that way. So that gives me counter-rotating props. Now, I've got the choice of either keeping this shaft as just purely as a support shaft and removing that gear off it and having a pulley put onto this section here, and still leave that bearing, get rid of that gear as well, but have a pulley, machine this off and put a pulley onto here, and then the belt drive would come down from the top box down around it like this and back up, and it would drive just that one using this purely as a support, and would just have a single prop on it. So it would be a direct drive. It would have, you wouldn't have the ability to have neutral at all. You'd have start and you'd be in forward gear and going. And now all you'd have is 4 bearings in total in the whole thing, and no gears, and the gears are my nightmare. I understand all the reasons why they've used gears to transmit the power through this particular unit, to do with size and what they've achieved with the space they've got. and I'm losing some of what they've achieved by losing the ability to have forward and reverse gear, but I've got a way around to deal with that as well. I'll come back to that in a minute. So some of my ideas are along the lines of A, what sort of devices are there or mechanisms that I could have about driving just one way, because obviously I can't reverse the direction in any form or fashion without getting the engine to run backwards, that I can counter-rotate. So I can drive both of these at the same time in the direction they want to go without putting a gear in. I understand I could potentially put a gear in here, but then I'm back to gears again, and that's my problem. So I want to get away from those gears. So I'm trying to think of any idea of any mechanism or mechanical way of driving the inner shaft that way and the outer shaft the other way. Now obviously they do it with a pinion. What's another option? Is there any other way it can be done? I've got some ideas, but I haven't come up with it. But my fallback position is I would just use this as a support and run a single prop, a lot bigger single prop instead of having the duo prop. But I'd love to keep the duo prop. The duo prop gives me a lot of advantages that I'd like to keep those advantages. So it would be done with a belt and a pulley, and then in the top, if that was the case, if it was done with a belt and a pulley, my questions then would become, how do I do these bearings? Do I machine the whole housing out further and get rid of that style of bearing and go to say something like an RHP bearing mount that I would put at each end, and then it only needs to be greased because there's a belt driving it. I don't have to have the whole thing in an oil bath. Or do I use timing chains? Do I go a double row timing chain and put a double cog timing chain in here that then I still use the oil in there, keep the same type of oil, but it doesn't have the deterioration of all the gears breaking down now, it's just purely the there to lubricate the bearings, and use the pump. I don't need the big pressure anymore, it just needs some pressure to send the oil circulating around. That's one way potentially of lubricating it. One of the other ideas potentially is with the top box here, keep the clutch, do it with chains instead of belts, keep the clutch working, machine so this would be forward gear here, machine just the gear off on both sides, and then run a timing chain off each gear instead. You have to do a lot more extensive work through this end here to get the two of them down, because obviously that there is round about how far apart they are in the top box, whereas in the lower unit, as you can see, the gears, the drive areas are in a whole lot closer. So that would still allow me to keep forward and reverse, which is a massive advantage. So is it worth machining the housing out to be able to allow me to run a chain down on a slight angle, using tensioners to change its angle so that it can come into this narrower gap and go out on that gap. A lot more work involved, lot can still be done. I can't see any showstoppers stopping it not being done, but that's an angle, that's one way of going. So my questions there are bearing block and grease, or do we still keep it in an oil bath, still use the same bearings that I'm used to, and I've got all the shims to be able to set the shafts up with load, etc. and backlash. Or go, like I say, bearing block and use belts instead. Which of those would have the ability the easiest to counter-rotate the two shafts? That's still my big question. One of the options, if I just went with direct drive, is I'll sit this top box just back on here just to show you, if we've only got a direct drive, obviously we have other issues. How do we reverse? How do we stop the boat? How do we start the boat when it's sitting in the wharf and don't really want it going forwards? So I've been looking at lots of different ways around that if I couldn't retain the clutch. And at the end of the day, the clutch is something that requires quite high pressures. So I wouldn't be adverse to losing the clutch, because very much the principle that I want to make this leg, if I do my own design leg, is as simple as possible. The pictures I sent you through of that leg I've been working on for the last week from Motueka, the one on the big vessel. It was big, it was industrial. I'll include a few more pictures for you to look at, but I loved the simplicity of it. It was just so bloody simple. And that's something that I think they pack so much into these legs You know, it's a smooth clutch, it's a smooth gear change. You've got a gearbox, power transmission, and changing the angle of your transmission, going from a vertical, comes out horizontal, down vertical, back out horizontal, counter-rotating. It's just all shit that can fly to bits. You've got to keep stuff as simple as possible. So, with this in mind, as the shape to still work with, I could be prepared to accept losing forward and reverse inside the leg, and just have it so when it starts and it's direct drive and away it goes. And I would mount on here, I'm just looking at them at the moment, two either 500 watt or maybe a little bit more than that. I'm trying to find if I can find a 4 kilowatt electric motor with a small propeller on it. And I'd electrically control that from the helm, so they'd be mounted either side of here. And for reverse, I'd actually have an electric operation, electric motors either side of it, mounted with props on them, just like you can buy a lot of this stuff off Alibaba already done, but I think I'd probably want to design something that worked better for us. And then when I want reverse, I do it electrically, still using the leg for the steering, etc. Because the two props are hard mounted on here. I've already seen it done on a couple of boats in the States, not quite to the same way I'm trying to do it, but conceptually the type of thing's been done before. They mount them across the back of the leg and use them as bow thrusters, stern thrusters instead. Whereas my idea is mount them this way, but do it with two single engines, because their little thrusters have a motor with props on both ends turning counter rotation, so that they thrust this way, and they push and pull at the same time. And then my way would be to have either one of those set up this way with one end no props on it, or I just get my own little motors, which I've been looking for and can find, mount them, waterproof them, put props on them and electrically control them with an electrical controller. And I can just reverse the boat electrically off the wharf, out, going forwards, and by just changing, because the motors go obviously forwards and backwards, and then as soon as I'm going forwards, start the motor and boom, and off you go and turn the electrics off. That's the way I'm thinking. So simple as possible, drive it with belts, bearing blocks to support everything, and a couple of electric motors on the back to give me my reverse. So yeah, real simplistic. I've had millions of different thoughts around it, but I haven't got you to sit there and talk to like I would normally have about ideas like this. So I've got to do something. My legs are just giving me absolute arseholes around the place. I just can't buy bits for them. I'm really struggling, so I've got to do something. There's the jet option, which I'm still looking to look down that pathway. But since doing that job I did last week, and we've only just put that boat back in the water 2 days ago, I realised there's a lot better ways to do it than this. While this has got lots in it, it's not suitable for the commercial application. It's got to be simple and strong. That's what it's got to be, and that's what I like about the belts. And that's also simple, and I still use an existing housing. I don't have to make my own housings. So yeah, have a look at it, think about it, and either give me a ring or make me a video back. Cheers, mate.